Good evening, thanks for joining me at an Irishman's Fireside, where each week we go through a different craft beer made in this country, and we'll read out a piece of literature, a piece of poetry, whatever takes my fancy. The beer tonight is called Passifyoucan. It's made in Dublin and in Howth in County Dublin, by the Hope Beer Brewery. And Passifyoucan, intriguing name. It's named after Michael Collier, a notorious 19th century highwayman. He was so successful that his townland was dubbed Passifyoucan. But the poor man died around 1807 of cholera. That'll happen. So pour this. Lovely rich colour. Oh, it's a lovely beer. What strength is it? 5.2. Okay, down to a bit of not poetry, but talk about William Butler Yeats. And Mr. Yeats, when living in London, used to have an at-home night on Mondays in his own residence, which was 18 Woburn Buildings. Here's a description of him by a man called Douglas Goldring. And on this particular evening, Ezra Pound, the American poet, is there. He seems to be dominating proceedings, and we'll see how they get on. I shall never forget my surprise when Ezra took me to one of Yeats's Mondays, at the way in which he dominated the room, distributing Yeats's cigarettes and Chianti, and laid down the law about poetry. Poor golden-bearded Sturge Moore, who sat in a corner with a large musical instrument by his side, on which he was never given a chance of performing, endeavoured to join in the discussion on prosody, a subject on which he believed himself not entirely ignorant. But Ezra promptly reduced him to a glum silence. My own emotions on this particular evening, since I did not possess Ezra's transatlantic brio, were an equal blend of reverence and a desire to giggle. I was sitting next to Yeats on a settle when a young Indian woman in a saree came and squatted at his feet and asked him to sing Inishfree, saying that she was certain he had composed it to an Irish air. Yeats was anxious to comply with this request, but unfortunately, like so many poets, he was completely unmusical, indeed almost tone deaf. He compromised by a sort of dirge-like incantation, calculated to send any unhappy giggler into hysterics. I bore it as long as I could, but at last the back of the settle began to shake, and I received the impact of one of the poet's nasty glances from behind his pince-nez. Mercifully, I recovered, but it was an awful experience. Thanks for listening to me tonight. We'll have a different beer the next night, and I'll go through my books and come out with some nice piece of literature. Good night.